Welcome back to the Monochrome Podcast. We're so excited that you guys are here once again with your favorite of the co-hosts, I am sure, Caitlin and JT.
Yes.
I love recording episodes with you, JT. So
I feel like we're definitely the most interesting for sure.
Oh, we've got to be. Yeah. Most dynamic, most energetic. I don't know. I don't get to record with everyone else nearly as much this season, but I have fun with JT.
We'll plug you in more with everyone else.
Oh, that's good. That's great. But we are grateful you guys are here. This is the Monochrome Podcast. It is a podcast for production, aka those techs out there who know what all the little buttons do, the creatives, the designers, all of you guys serving in your local church. Welcome. We are not here with all the answers, but we hope to ask some great questions that get your team talking. Before we dive in to some amazing segments that we have for this week's podcast, I do want to tease next week. We're talking with Sarah Benebo next week. And I just know her workshop blew up when she was at SALT teaching a workshop. Like, people were standing at the door. Everyone was excited to hear from her. And so I am sure, I haven't heard it yet, but I am sure the interview we have with her was just amazing. So please make sure to tune in next week. Put it on your calendar. JT, let's dive in. What are you listening to? What's going on? What is in those headphones of yours right now?
So I have been, and this may surprise you, I'm maybe behind the ball, but as the marketing manager at SALT, I just started listening through the story brand marketing kind of books. So the first one I started with was building a story brand, which is kind of just the overarching. So there's a few more other ones I encourage everyone to go read, but I just wanted to talk about that one. And it's definitely a marketing book, but what I wanted to emphasize a little bit with this is, and as I was listening to it, I was like, man, churches could really use this way of thinking as they think about the events they do, Easter planning, like promoting, Easter services, that sort of thing, Christmas services, and just in understanding how to tell a really good story that relates to your community and the people that you're trying to serve. And so whether you're in a big city or, our area, there's a lot of drug abuse and stuff like that. And so how do you tell a story that speaks to those people? And it's obviously the story of the gospel, but how do you tailor it in a way that really directly speaks to those people? So I want to go through just a couple points of this book, but I encourage you to go read it. It's like $16 to get the audiobook or buy it on Amazon. So it's totally worth it. But yes, so the three key takeaways that I would pitch to you guys that you'll get out of this book that I got out of it for churches is that it clarifies the real problem you're solving. So a lot of times we like to talk about our church or how big it is, or that we have a choir, or that we have small groups, or that you'll find community in an ambiguous way. And so it's important to what is the problem we're solving? We're solving, hopelessness, lostness, emptiness, lack of purpose. Maybe they have a drug problem and they truly need that problem solved. Or maybe they're struggling to take care of their families and they need that problem solved. How can you offer those people tangible hope and communicate that? So don't just talk about what your church offers or the programs you have. Talk about the problems people are facing and how your church can solve those problems through Jesus Christ ultimately.
That's awesome.
So the second one is, and this is a big one he talks about, is your company or your organization, your church, position them as the guide, not the hero. So your church doesn't save people, whether you knew that or not. Now you know.
Whoa,
you don't save people.
Hold on, what?
So if this is news to you.
Hopefully this isn't news to anybody.
Yeah, welcome to ministry. But your church doesn't save people. You don't save people. Your technology doesn't save people. Your preacher doesn't save people. Your building doesn't save people, right? But you guide people to Jesus and you use the tools you have to tell that story well. And so positioning your church as, hey, we're not the solution to your problems, but we have a solution and we know who the solution is, and it's Jesus. Mm-hmm. So making sure that you highlight stories of transformation, show how your church is walking alongside people and pointing them to Jesus. And the different ways in which you do that is important. People are looking for someone to help lead them to that solution. So that's something that just aligned, I think, so clearly with what ministry is. So I think that's why this book is helpful, is because it helps you go, this is how we reach people. This is how we tell this story well. And then my last point, always include a clear call to action. I think this is something we struggle with a lot in the church because We're not like selling a product, so to speak, like, hey, go buy this vacuum cleaner. We're selling a mission, a life, a goal, a way of thinking, a book, the Bible, a story. And so sometimes having a clear call to action can be difficult. Like, do we want them to come to church on Sunday? Do we want them to know Jesus? Do we want them to call us to have a gospel conversation? Like, what does that look like? But I think defining what that clear call to action for every time you're talking about what your church is doing or promoting is important. Is it to join you for Easter on Sunday? Is it to come to an event? Is it to join a small group? What are those clear call to actions? And making sure to be intentional about that and understand that, something he talks a lot about in this book is people don't want to be salesy. And so oftentimes they're far more timid to ask people to be a part of something or to give or to buy now, as he says it. And they're too timid. So oftentimes you're not going to be too salesy. Like, you have to try pretty hard to be too salesy. And most people are going to be on that not as salesy enough side. And so this would be my encouragement. Like, ask people to come to church, ask people to give, ask people to get involved, and be intentional about it and direct. So
I love that.
Yeah. 3 quick takeaways. Go check that book out. I think it's helpful, especially if you're on a comms team and you're dealing a lot with messaging and promoting what your church does and the ministries you're a part of. I think this book is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, definitely. We forget sometimes that the church is a business in some ways, at least when it comes to the things you can learn on how to do church well. Sometimes you forget it can come from a business book. We talk internally a lot about how God can use people who aren't Christians to still, spread his word and his mission. And
well, and the author of that book, he is a Christian. And so that's an added bonus is I think a lot of the principles he's talking about in here come from just the story of the gospel overarching.
I love that.
And how Jesus did ministry. He doesn't explicitly say that, so I could be interpreting that a little bit. But I think Jesus was the best at doing ministry. And so learning how to tell, what he did and his story well is just inherent in life.
Yeah,
so anyway.
Definitely. Yeah, well, we've got some awesome friends over at Amplio who have got a awesome event planned for us. Let's take a listen. We have some amazing partners who have helped make this podcast happen this year. And our friends at Amplio Systems are not just there to install gear, but they are also church leaders who've been in the trenches. They know the pressures of Sunday, they know what you're going through, and they believe your AV system should support your ministry and not distract from it. We love Amplio because they walk with churches from start to finish. They design amazing, future-proof, volunteer-friendly systems that help people encounter Jesus and, again, not distract from it, which we know can sometimes be a problem with the AV systems. But you can meet Amplio, you can talk to them, hear more about how they could help your church specifically. You can meet them at the Worship Classic on October 7th, which is the day before SALT. So come to Nashville, go golfing with Amplio at the Worship Classic, and then come to SALT together. It is free, which is an extra bonus, and they would love to hear your story. But if you want to check out more info, learn more about the Worship Classic or what Amplio does, just click the link in the show notes. All right, I want to dive into a favorite segment of mine. We used to do this often, but I think it's the first time in the season, but having a little staff meeting moments.
I honestly, just being honest, kind of forgot that we did this. And I was like, oh, I think those are valuable. We should go back and do more of those. So that's my beat. I'll own that.
I love finding for our team little ways to remind us or little practices we can do, tricks of the trade to be more productive, to be better at being a team, to help us grow individually or together. And they're my little staff meeting moments. So I love it. But today, our team, this moment is coming from the book Unreasonable Hospitality. It's been just a favorite among our team the past couple months. And while it is about the restaurant industry, it just applies to almost anything you do, whether it be the church or even us working on SALT Conference in our community. It applies to so much. And so really quick, I want to talk about something they talk about in that book, the importance of the daily huddle, or sometimes what we call stand up on our team. But it is so important that every single day you are connecting as a team. And it's not just you walk into the office, say good morning, and then you just bop into each other to ask questions. see what you did over the weekend and that be it. You know, you need intentionality with your team. So it usually looks like a very quick check-in, which can be business related, talk about a few housekeeping things, maybe a couple goals, reminders for the day or the week. Connect on a personal level as well, where maybe, you know, you're just showing as a leader that you care for more than just what's getting done in the office, that you care for more about the business side of church, which we kind of referenced earlier. Like, church to a point is a bit of a business, but that work day, we know there's more than just the work day and the work getting done. And it's important to connect on that personal side about that. And then celebrate your wins as a team. It's important to point out when someone had an awesome accomplishment, when the team as a whole had a great win. But doing these little daily huddles are just vital, and I think sometimes are the lifeblood of your team. Otherwise, it just becomes work as usual, and you don't have those little personal connections. People forget that there are things that matter more than just getting the to-do list done every single day at their own desk. And so these little daily huddles are fantastic. Here's a few tips, though, to make them successful on your team. Number one, make them consistent. I know for SALT, it's every day at 9:30. We have a half hour on the schedule. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. It depends on how much we get talking and how much we need to connect about, whether it be the business side of things or the personal side, how much we want to chat about. But make it consistent. Make sure you're focusing on the connection between teammates. Give agency. That's my third tip. Leaders, it is not your chance to share and be leading by talking about all about your weekend or what your plans are or what celebrations you had. This is a chance to highlight others. This is a chance to let your team connect with each other. And it's not just about you leading all of that. So give that agency. And then number 4, just listen, observe, and remember. You got someone whose wife is looking for a job and they mention it on your daily huddle. Remember that. That way, when you see a post later, you can share it and maybe you can help that person find a job. Someone is celebrating or maybe going through a hard time in life. Make a note. Remember that as a leader. You know, those are the personal connections your team really, I think, appreciates when you remember those things. And it's okay to write them down. It's okay to write down these personal connections and things that you need to remember and help you remember. People would rather you remember because you wrote them down than you didn't remember because you didn't write it down, whatever. But yeah, these daily huddles, again, we call them stand-ups, just super important, super vital. There are days, honestly, where I think JT, you and I can both say they're frustrating because you just want to dive into your work that day. You don't want to hear about so-and-so's not a bad way, so-and-so's kid who won another baseball championship, you know?
Yeah. I'm a type 3, so I'm efficiency. But I will say, I think it's, especially if you're a remote or maybe more relaxed kind of office space where there's some more hybrid kind of hours going on, which I think a lot of churches do, especially if you're bivocational or that sort of thing. It can be really helpful to have a regular check-in time to be like, hey, this is where we're at. Here's some things I'm waiting on, get through some of those things that would maybe happen in a less organized or kind of sporadic way through Slack or email. And you can kind of bring those priorities to the top for the team. Like you said, I think it's great too for the personal connection, especially if you're remote. You're not getting that every day, popping into the office, those sorts of things. And so having a little bit of a quick connection, just remember that everyone you work with is human and they have lives and there's things going on, and kind of staying up to date on that is helpful. So
yeah, I definitely need those reminders too. Yeah. I'm not an Enneagram 3, but I am that person who comes in and wants to knock out my to-do list and focus on the job. And I also need to remember, hey, we're human and we've got personal lives, and it's okay for us to touch base about how we're doing in those too. So yeah. It's good. It's good.
Very good.
That is my little staff meeting moment for today. Hope y'all enjoyed. I love our little staff meeting moments. So stay tuned for future staff meeting moments, and you can learn even more. But I will say too, at SALT Conference that is happening this fall in October, we specifically designed some workshops around leadership and ways to help with communication, productivity, systems within your team as a leader. So I want to encourage y'all, check out salt2025.com. Link is in the show notes. But we want you to be a part of conference. We want you to talk with other leaders and other people who do what you do, build some community, help problem solve anything you're working on in your church and with your team right now. And you can do that in person with us in Nashville, Tennessee. Just because we love you all and we want you to join us, we do have a code for you to use. In the show notes, use the code Monochrome when you go to register for your SALT tickets, and you can get $20 off each ticket when you use that code.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, coming up next, we have our interview with Jay Kranda. Incredible guy. He is the online pastor leader at Saddleback Church. So you probably know that name. They're a very large church. And he is also the author of the book, Online Church is Not the Answer. So very interesting book title for an online pastor to have published.
Yeah.
So excited for this conversation. It's really great. I think you'll learn a lot from it. So take a listen.
So glad to have my friend Jay Kranda here. Jay, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, and I'm excited to talk about digital strategy, online church, wherever this is going to go.
Yeah, so you have been a friend and a part of the SALT community for years. You've been at Saddleback Church for longer than you've been a friend of SALT, and you've written a book. It is called Online Church is Not the Answer. So I'm excited to have you on here. We're going to talk about why online church is the answer, and we're just going to totally contradict everything you've written in your book, right?
Yeah, I know. That's the key, is just to kind of pivot to go, Jay, defend it now.
Well, do this real quick, Jay, before we kind of dive into some of the meat of this combo, because I think this is going to be enriching for everybody listening. Give just a quick snapshot of your history at Saddleback and kind of your role today.
Yeah, so I kind of grew up at a small church, came to faith at a small church in kind of the greater LA area, and then found myself looking for job opportunities coming out of college. And one of my mentors had happened to be at this very large church. I didn't really know too much about it. And all of a sudden, I found myself interning at the church, and then I started on our communications team at Saddleback Church. And our founding pastor, Pastor Rick Warren there, very famous, popular person. And then
He's
it was
written
kind
a
of
book or two that I think
he's written a couple books. His book is, I will just say, doing a little bit better than mine. And
I heard him say once that his book is like second only to the Bible in the globe or something
it's true.
like that.
One of my favorite bits ever was one of our teaching pastors at the time. He's not at Saddleback now, but Doug Fields, who's very popular too. But Doug's awesome.
Specialties, DYN.
Yep. I interned with him when I first came to Saddleback, and Doug's amazing. But he used to make a joke, like when they ship his books, when they ship Rick's book, they use Doug's books to package the book.
To pad it.
To pad it, which I thought was always great. I started at Saddleback in 2009, and really I was on our communications teams doing social media, a lot of early digital strategy, like starting a Facebook ministry, a Twitter ministry, and just kind of grew into it. It wasn't something that I went to school for. I went to school to be a pastor, and now I was somehow in this communication strategy thing. And then quickly it just kind of grew into online church was something. I got introduced to ministries like, Life Church and Elevation, and, I could name so many, Westside Family Church, all these amazing churches doing cool things online. And around 2010, they said, Jay, can you focus a little bit on our online church strategy? And I did. I started to invest. 2013, I was hired as our first online pastor at the church.
In 2013.
In 2013, before it was like, it was very sacrilegious at the time what I was doing. I tell the story in my book that I was in seminary at the time still. And because I was going back for my MA in theology. And I remember I went to one of my professors, like, I'm thinking about this online church role. And my professor looked at me like, had no idea what I was talking about. Was like, what? Doing ministry on, what is that? Like, are you, like, should I kick you out of the school? Like, I don't know what is going on. And then we just started to figure out, how do we do online stuff connected to our local church strategy? Especially we had a lot of multi-sites that we were starting around the same time. Then we started international campuses. And so it was it was a lot of learning and growing. And then that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was I didn't have a lot of people to talk to. And I really wanted to write down some of my thoughts to help other churches think through this. And then recently I stepped into a new role as our innovative tech pastor, where online community still kind of sits under my leadership. That team reports to me, but I also oversee our website, our app team, our devs, also our system. We're in the process of moving to the Rock RMS. And so, so it's just a different role. Now it's just kind of helping the whole church think about technology. And it's been a wild ride.
I love it. Well, you've been a pioneer of this for years. You've been a thought leader on this topic for years. And so this is why I'm super excited. I just want to kind of dive right in. I think from my perspective, I go to a church that during COVID, they started streaming, right? They did all the quote online service stuff. And I just want to say, like, they've now stopped that. They've kind of gone back to like only in person. Talk about the buzz. What are you sort of seeing? What happened in COVID? I mean, we're now several years past that, as we're sort of recording this. And, what have you seen as far as like the buzz around online services, online church, and kind of why this book is like honestly landing at like perfect timing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's one of those, as somebody who was doing online ministry prior to COVID, had a paid, one of my OG, creds now is like, I say I was paying for Zoom before COVID, just FYI, everybody. But one of the interesting things that happened during COVID was there was this democratizing of this where like everybody did it, everybody understood it. You were kind of forced to figure it out. I say this a lot, but I had a friend of a local church who was probably pastoring a church here in Southern California, about probably around 500 people. And he was one of my professors, actually. And he messaged me during COVID, and he was one of my friends and kind of mentors. And he said, Jay, like during pre-COVID, we were flirting with digital. COVID was like a shotgun wedding for our church with digital. And now it's just like, are we going to have a healthy or unhealthy relationship with this?
Yeah.
And I was like, Bill, that is a great framing of it. I mean, because that's true. And I think a lot of churches during COVID, and I think even post-COVID, they've really embraced the streaming or the content strategy of digital strategy in church, meaning they put their content on Facebook or YouTube. Maybe they use the church online platform, which is called Chop. They might do some type of content strategy. I think content-wise, churches have kind of figured that out. And in some cases, they've kind of regressed. They go, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I really, my push with most churches, and I would say with pastors, is that I think a lot of the wins around integrating digital strategy at your church is not content as much as it is like more discipleship, relationship based. And thinking
it's much bigger
beyond
than just a service.
It's so much bigger than a service, because I would say, like, I tell a lot of churches, like, hey, yeah, during COVID, you were doing all this. Maybe you only need to do one of those things. So don't, like, for example, don't stream. Like a lot of churches stream 2 to 3 services like on a Sunday, or they're streaming to all these things, or they're doing all this stuff, and they have this big streaming bill to do this. And I go, I'm not saying that stuff is bad. I'm just saying, like, instead of streaming 3 things, maybe just do one thing. And we need to, a lot of churches have to figure out this line between what you put online does represent you. And if it's not high quality, or if it doesn't like represent you well, maybe don't do it, and maybe just do this other thing. And I get more excited about, starting WhatsApp groups and, maybe a devotional, like reel strategy on Instagram. And I don't get as excited about streaming your service on YouTube, because the YouTube thing is like, you're pretty much like putting a product that's meant for a room online.
Yeah.
And that disconnect.
People are kind of peering in. They're not actually engaging or dialoguing or participating.
Yeah. I kind of call it the aquarium, where they're just peeking into this thing, And again, it's not a bad strategy. I think there's a lot of stuff we did during COVID that maybe if you can just continue rolling, okay. But I do want to encourage, and this is kind of my hope with some of the thoughts like I put out in the book, is think beyond just streaming to like more hybrid discipleship type of stuff.
Okay, so putting you on the spot, you've kind of already danced around this topic, but is online ministry more about evangelism, reaching people? I'd even beg to say, like, I'm sure there are certain pastors maybe listening to this that would say online church is about church growth, right? We're giving you the first step into the door, the sort of easy entry. Or do you see it more as, no, we should actually use it as church depth, not church growth, but church depth, discipleship, an opportunity for you to go deeper in your faith, to engage with people in sort of a more everyday experience, not just Sunday or not just Wednesday or something?
I think most of the opportunity for churches is around going deeper. And I think that there are, like most pastors, like if you like and I've had a lot of these conversations, like the reason why a lot of pastors or churches onboarded during COVID isn't just to serve a problem, but it's because like they started to see like their church of 100 could get 500 views on Facebook.
Right.
And they were like, oh my goodness. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
they were reaching more, right?
They were reaching more. The question was that reach didn't mean it was leading to deep engagement, because that view was being counted in a scroll on a feed. And so it's like, this is why like you would go like I remember talking to like churches like a tenth of our size, and they would tell me how many people were part of their online community or their church stream. And it's like, somehow they're like 5 times larger than us. And it's like, oh, because you're counting an impression or you're counting a reach. And a lot of the hard part is a lot of this stuff during COVID was not intentional. It's just they were getting educated. It's like a college student learning about the world's politics, and they're just like, oh, look at that. And they don't really understand what they're saying yet. They're still getting like uploaded of what all this means, and they're forming a worldview. And I think there was a lot of that. I think COVID was this adolescence almost of churches figuring out stuff and experimenting, and now we're coming out of it.
And you're talking about like people watching their views and thinking that counted as a full view, but really it was like a 10-second view or something.
It was a 10-second. Yeah. So like the thought is like, it's like counting how many people drive by your church building on Sunday as like they actually attended.
That does maybe matter, right?
It does.
Because you're placing somewhere in a high traffic area. But yeah, the question is how many. So what does, Jay, to you, what does church depth look like? What is online discipleship? I know you've got a couple of different frameworks. Give maybe a couple of little nuggets here. How does a pastor, how does a technical person on this, listening to this conversation go, yeah, let's not just make this about exposure to a Sunday service aquarium model. How do we go deep? What does that look like?
So at a high level, I have this like kind of alpha and omega tool where what I encourage is to kind of lay out the way your church does church, however you make disciples in your church's model. And there's a lot of different approaches and ways to do this that I think obviously God is using and churches are thriving. But like lay it from, kind of alpha to omega, from beginning to end. You lay it out like, okay, so we have church on weekends, and then we have like maybe a Bible study strategy. Then we have these discipleship classes. Then we have this. And if you lay it all out, and one of my encouragements is if you lay out all your core programs, tools, platforms, whatever that is to your local church strategy. And the question is
you're talking about in-person strategy currently.
I'm saying in-person
lay
strategy.
Out your in-person. Yep.
Lay it out. And like in my visual that I kind of lay out is kind of like a diagram visual that you lay it out into categories. And the question is I make the argument that the point of church is not to fill a room, but to produce spiritual fruit. So a lot of people, and again, this is kind of the blessing and the curse of, especially here, and I'm talking to our primarily our American audience here. We have this amazing blessing season that we're in, that we get freedom of worship and we have buildings and space. This is not historically true in Christianity, but it is true for this moment. And so my encouragement is, you think your job as a pastor or as a church leader is to fill your room. I don't think that is a consequence or something we get to do right now. But the point is to produce spiritual fruit in people's lives, in their homes, when they're with their families, at their workplaces, as they're raising their kids, doing all sorts of stuff. So it's to produce spiritual fruit, not to fill a room. So the question is, as you lay out all your core programming, the things you do to make disciples, the question is, how can you use digital to produce fruit more in those key areas? So like a very practical example is like overplayed example, but let's say you have a Bible study strategy where you host Bible studies in your building or in homes in your area. The question is I'm not saying to stop doing that. Do that. Maybe 2 to 3 times a year, you have a Zoom strategy for people that have busy schedules. Maybe they're unconnected to church. They're not ready to show up to a room, but they will show up to a Zoom because they do this for work and they're very comfortable. And there's a lot of reasons why Zoom could work for people that are, traveling for work. Maybe they have social anxiety things. Maybe there's all sorts of reasons, but maybe introducing a crawl step to your Bible study strategy. It's not every week. It's not every other month. Maybe it's just 3 times a year or 2 times a year. The same thing could be true for, and again, insert any type of discipleship. Like I'll use one for us. Like we have membership at our church. So I know not all churches have membership, but we do every 6 weeks. We have a membership class, and all of our physical like campuses do this every every 6 weeks they have one of these events that's 2 hours. What if, and this is where I would go to our local campuses, like they do this about 10 times a year. And the argument is maybe you still do it 10 times a year in person, but you do twice a year, you do it on Zoom. And you do it for those, like I always bring up the example. I was raised primarily by a single mom. My mom raised me and my 2 other brothers. She was working like crazy, and she couldn't always be at stuff because of her work schedule. And so I'm not saying the church needs to forsake the in-person. I'm saying introduce a digital option for these other categories, because not everybody has infinite time. And so this is my encouragement, is to integrate digital in some small ways, not stopping the physical, but figuring out how to kind of do it together.
I love that. And what you're saying is the digital needs to not just be for online only participants in your church sort of ecosystem of programming, but it's also for the in-person people who just simply can't make it. I mean, I resonate with that. When we joined the church we're currently at, we had 2 young kids at the time, and it was very difficult to give numerous weeks in a row. Ours was Thursday nights, and we had to go to like 3 of the 4 in order to, quote, like learn enough to be a member.
Yeah.
And we struggle with that. Now we were able to tag team. So like one of us went one night, another went the next week, and then we got a babysitter and both went the third. But their idea would have been the couple or the family goes to all 4. But to your point, like a digital experience of that would have made it so much easier for us to not, miss it, or to have allowed like an online catch up or something to meet the pastors to ask questions.
I do think one of the bigger things, and this is a tension I think our churches have to wrestle through, but I think one of the things is learning on a podcast or a YouTube video or showing up to a Zoom. These are compelling formats that we all use now. The issue is not it not being compelling. The issue is we have to determine when we call an event and we ask people to show up in person. I think we have to understand when we pull that trigger to say like, this is the event that you need to be here. I think we have to make sure that it adds more value than we realize now.
Yeah.
Because to get a babysitter to do the things that are all important. Like for me, like I got 3 kids. I got, almost high school or a middle school student in an elementary school. And like during the week, I am carting people around between.
So you're a full-time Uber driver.
Yeah. Me and my wife were like, like last night I was driving back and forth 4 times because my one son had a soccer practice, then a Bible, like a life group. And I don't think people, and again, this is my push to church leaders. I'm not saying not to do the event in person. I'm just saying when you say you're going to do an event, decide if it's worth it being in person. So like an example like I bring, and this is kind of a famous example at our church, where we had a big parent event where we twice a year did these big parent events on Saturdays. And it was a really cool event. And essentially one year it really fell flat on its face. Nobody showed up on Saturday morning. And one of the ironies was we kind of had a moment, and we realized like maybe if our objective is to train parents, maybe having them come on a Saturday morning after a busy week isn't a great format to actually train parents how to raise kids biblically. And what they did was they pivoted that whole event strategy to a podcast strategy. And now they drop monthly podcasts. And again, not everything needs to be a podcast, because I think that's kind of the default answer now. But I think the question is I think we got to make sure if we're asking our members and our attenders to be somewhere, just make sure it's worth it. And if it is just a training, maybe if you can deliver what you can deliver in a 15-minute YouTube video or a 30-minute podcast, then you need to reverse engineer, like, how do I make it that there needs to be more? And I think those are the questions that we have to wrestle through.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's just constantly going back to this idea of like, we got to think differently so that we can integrate digital into your church strategy. It's not the only strategy. It's not the way of the future. I think that's what you've really helped me realize, Jay, is, everybody in COVID was like, oh, online streaming or online church is like the future. It's where everybody's going. No. It's just got to be part of the future, right? It's got to be a piece of your strategy. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to ask this question as we sort of wrap up. For the creative pastor, for the technical leader who's listening to this, but maybe isn't the senior pastor, or maybe isn't the decision maker on online church, what do you say to them to help them kind of get a vision to sort of grow an online ministry beyond just streaming Sunday? recognizing, this is going to take financial resources. It's going to take time. It may take volunteers. It may take, staff people to sort of focus on this. What do you encourage them to kind of think about as they're proposing something like this to really encourage deep and wide church growth?
Yeah, I think one of the reminders that I would just kind of like throw into everyone's mind, that as you're processing some of these ideas, that we are living in a really weird moment here where a lot of the future is unknown. And what I mean by that is your leaders don't really know how to do this. They don't know how to integrate digital. There's all these burdens that they are trying to wrestle through. They're coming out of COVID, still trying to fill up their spaces. They're trying to, pay the bills. They're trying to do this. They're wrestling. And then this digital thing, like, I'm somebody that's kind of, my first iterations of using the internet was AOL and all these things. I've grown up with it, but your bosses most likely don't have any idea. So I think it's important that you have to understand. I remember I had this moment a long time ago. I remember being in a room with a lot of smart people, and I was super young at the moment. And I remember just kind of having this aha. I was like, oh, they don't know what to do. They are waiting for me to give an answer. And I say that not to scare you, and not even to like ego boost the person, listening, watching this right now. But I think it's important that you will need to cast vision. Yeah. And you will need to flesh out the idea more, because your boss is not going to have a lot of opinions. Like they might have an opinion, but they're not going to have a lot of confidence in that opinion. And so I say that like understand that your church has a specific strategy and objectives and theology, and you have to wrestle through that. And then my encouragement is to cast some vision to go, what could a digital integration win look like for this? And I would encourage you to pitch it like, this is what I'm thinking, not like, this is what I know. And I do think I've had to do this many times where you're pitching new ideas that are maybe like not controversial, but like they don't make sense. You have to relationally kind of figure out what makes sense for your church. And that's the hard part, because if, like, for example, like, and I'll say this just candidly, our founding pastor, Pastor Rick, amazing leader, amazing man. But he, when he was the lead pastor, he's kind of this stereotypical, guy in his 60s. And the way he uses the internet and the way I use the internet are very different. Very different. I will say it's a lot easier for me to pitch stuff digitally to my new pastor who's in his 40s. Yeah. Because he uses the internet more like the way I use the internet. And I say that like, understand that there are problems you have to solve, and just understand who you're pitching it to. And I have found, and I'll say this very simply, as the more that I've proven that I'm a good steward of our church's vision and theology, and I have short-term wins, I get more trust. That's right. And so instead of coming in, and this is why it's like, don't pitch the idea that's like everything. Pitch the idea to show that you can be a good steward. And over time, and I know somebody's like listening to this and it's like, no, Jay, I want to do everything tomorrow. I understand. I'm with you too. I'm like very antsy. But I will say, like, Jedi. Yeah, patience. I know. Slow. I wish I could say that to me a long time ago, way more. But I have shown like one of the reasons why there's a lot that I'm able to do and our church is able to do is because I was just in my role for 12 plus years. Yeah. And over time, and trust me, there are things said to me. There are times where they didn't listen to me, where I'm like, oh, it drives me nuts. But over time, I grew, I learned. There's times where I'm glad they didn't listen to me, by the way. But I think over time, I got more authority, more trust, and then that led to more opportunities to do bigger stuff. So I know that's a long answer, but that's how I might frame it. Yeah, I would add, just as you were talking about this, the only thing I was thinking about was whether your pastor's 60 or whether it's 40, and they understand tech or they don't understand technology, they are online, they are not. Make sure that you're framing your vision of what online ministry could be in context of their current vision for the church, right? Don't miss their heart for people. Don't miss their heart for helping, bear fruit in the congregants that they're reaching. Because I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the like strategy and the technology and the sort of features and the platforms that we get really excited. We're like, oh my gosh, look at this and look at this feature, that like, they're just like, okay, all you care about is the tech.
No. Make sure you're pitching it in vein of their vision for, like you said, the theology and the direction of kind of the church. So awesome. Jay Kranda's book, Online Church is Not the Answer, is available, I believe, like everywhere books are sold. Where does it make the most sense, Jay, for people to buy it?
Yeah, you could check it out on Amazon. I also have an audio, so if you listen to audio, be kind to my voice.
It.
So, but
sold.
I wish I could just talk about how to create an audiobook because that was fun. So, but I know
and tough.
Yeah, tough, very tough. Yeah, but thanks for having me on, Luke.
Hey, absolutely. Jay, where can people connect with you after they buy Online Church is Not the Answer and they want to go deeper?
Yeah, jkranda.com. Yeah, that always sounds very vain to say that out loud.
It's easy.
But it's easy. jkranda.com. I have a bunch of stuff. I'm always writing blogs and sharing stuff that I'm learning. I care a lot about helping churches think about this because I didn't have a ton of people to talk to when I started.
I love it. Well, we'll put all this in the show notes. Jay, thanks for your time, man.
Of course.
We've had such awesome interviews like Jay, not just Jay. I mean, that was a great interview, but more interviews. And so if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, please make sure to go check out some other episodes, subscribe so that you are ready to listen to the interviews to come because we have had some amazing conversations. So thank you, Jay, and thank you everyone else for tuning in to listen. Again, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Definitely, if you can, give us one of those 5-star ratings. It helps us out. It helps people know that this is a great community and podcast to listen to and be a part of. And then share it with a friend because we're not into gatekeeping. So definitely share. But if you can, go check out the show notes. Maybe when you're done driving and listening to this podcast, when you sit down at your desk at work in the morning, log in, check out wherever you're watching us from, the show notes where we will have a link to Jay's book, to some of his info, and then really links to anything we've talked about today. That discount for tickets, the Amplio Worship Classic, the Listening Now, Building a Story Brand book that JT talked about. We will have links to these things. So please go check those out so you're not missing out on the next steps to take after hearing and learning about some of the things we talked about today. And of course, next week, please join us. We are talking with Sarah Benibo, who had an amazing worship workshop with us last year at SALT, and it was just a great conversation to come. So make sure to tune in. JT and I will miss you in the meantime, but we'll see you again soon.
See you next week.